Thank you. The next item of business is the members' business debate on motion 17647 in the name of Marie McNair on Action Mesothelioma Day 2025. This debate will be concluded without any questions being put, and I would invite those members who would wish to speak in the debate to please press the request to speak buttons, and I call on Marie McNair to open the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I'm pleased to be leading this debate for a fourth year on Action Mesothelioma Day. Members will know the huge importance of this issue to me and my constituents, and this debate is an important chance to raise awareness of this cruel disease and highlight where we still need to push for action. I thank colleagues from across the Chamber for supporting my motion and speaking in this debate. This issue deserves cross-party support, so it's very welcome that this has been achieved. Presiding Officer, can I ask everyone to join me in welcoming the Clydebank Asbestos Group and Asbestos Action to our National Parliament? It really means a lot to have them here to support today's event. Both groups have been assisting asbestos victims for many years and have campaigned relentlessly for truth and justice. The Clydebank Asbestos Group, who I am grateful to have a close working relationship with, have been working hard for my constituents for the last 33 years, always there for victims and their families at the time of greatest need. I am so appreciative to have them within my constituency and will be forever grateful to them for the work they do. Mesothelioma is a cancer that is usually caused by exposure to asbestos fibres. Can I congratulate Action Meso and all the support groups up and down the country on their efforts to raise awareness of this disease. Unfortunately, since our last Meso debate, we have sadly lost our amazing volunteer, Kate Ferrier, on Hogmanay last year. Kate was a volunteer with the Clydebank Asbestos Group for over 5 years and shortly after joining took up the post as secretary. Kate's passing is a huge loss, and she will be incredibly missed by all who knew her. Kate chose to volunteer with CAG when she retired, drawn to the charity because of her support for her father, following a diagnosis of an asbestos-related disease. I'm so grateful for Kate's dedication and commitment to supporting victims of asbestos exposure and their families over many years. Clydebank, part of my constituency and my hometown, has an appalling asbestos legacy, and it's once been described as the mesothelioma capital of Europe. And that's why Action Mesothelioma Day is so important to my constituents and our town. Held this year on the 4th of July, it is a national event to raise awareness of asbestos and mesothelioma, to raise vital funds to support the research into tackling mesothelioma, and to remember and support those who have been impacted by the disease. In last year's debate, I highlighted this disgraceful 3-year time bar, which has denied justice for those who receive a diagnosis of mesothelioma. This time bar means that if a person is diagnosed with pleural plaques, a usual asymptomatic condition, they have 3 years to raise a claim for damages, even if they later develop mesothelioma. This is an appalling injustice, so it's welcome that the Scottish Law Commission have now published a report on the issue which recommends resolving the pleural plaques time bar problem so that an asymptomatic condition such as pleural plaques will no longer result in a time bar preventing recovery of damages for a later developing symptomatic condition such as mesothelioma. The potential for people to be denied justice because of a 3-year time bar has no place in a just compensation system. And that is why I have secured a meeting with the Clydebank Asbestos Group and the Justice Minister, Siobhan Brown, to progress this issue. And we want the Scottish Government to implement the recommendations as soon as possible, as justice delayed is justice denied. My partnership with the Clydebank Asbestos Group is strong and has shared goals in the campaign for truth and justice. Issues like a more compassionate and responsive social security system compared to that previously provided by the DWP. The phased removal of the asbestos from public buildings, starting with schools, and I'm firmly on their side in support of the Cape Must Pay campaign. Never has there been a stronger example of greed for private profit being put before the safety of workers. And unfortunately, this is the motivating factor in so many asbestos exposures and exploitation of workers. The campaign demands that Cape Intermediate Holdings, owned by Altrad, donate £10 million to mesothelioma research. Cape Intermediate Holdings was one of the largest asbestos companies in the world and is reported to have played a large part in the increase of asbestos-related diseases and mortality across the UK. After a lengthy court battle, documents were obtained proving that Cape hid the true dangers of its asbestos products in the 1960s and 70s, resulting in many people dying as a result. Altrad has a moral obligation to right some of this wrong, and donating to research would be a good start. They have so far refused to meet these demands, but the Clydebank Asbestos Group have been pushing forward with this campaign tirelessly, and they've recently attended protests at the Rugby World Cup, which features 2 teams which were sponsored by Altrad. I'll continue to push with the Clydebank Asbestos Group to see justice achieved from Cape, and the time is now to support victims. They can't wait any longer because time just isn't on their side. I'll soon bring a motion to Parliament on this issue with wording agreed with the Clydebank Asbestos Group and other campaigners, and I hope, like the motion today, it will receive the widest possible cross-party support. Action Mesothelioma Day serves as a chance to commemorate all those who have lost to this cruel disease. And in Clydebank, we have the International Asbestos Memorial, which sits in the centre of Clydebank in Truth and Justice Square. Also, the Clydebank Asbestos Group have recently opened an online memorial launched on International Workers' Memorial Day. The online memorial is open to anyone who would like to commemorate a loved one who has died from asbestos-related illness. This is such a great way to remember those we have lost, and I commend the group for this. Presiding Officer, we must deal with asbestos on all fronts, and we must support those who are diagnosed with mesothelioma and other asbestos-related illnesses by offering help when it's needed. And I promise that I'll continue to do everything in my power to work to achieve everything we can in our fight for truth and justice. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McNair. We will now move to the open debate. Backbench speeches of up to 4 minutes. I call Bill Kidd to be followed by Pam Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I would like to thank Marie McNair for again bringing us today's debate marking Mesothelioma Day 2025, and I'd like to commend her long-standing commitment to this deeply important cause. On the 4th of July, we will once again pause to reflect, to raise awareness and, crucially, to demand action. Mesothelioma is a cruel and relentless disease. It's relatively rare, yes, but it's far from irrelevant. It is a cancer caused almost entirely by exposure to asbestos, those invisible fibres that embed themselves in lungs, silently wreaking havoc over decades. As we've heard, we are currently seeing around 200 cases annually here in Scotland, but behind every statistic is a family, a community, and often a story of unnecessary suffering. Tragically, the face of mesothelioma is changing. Where once it was seen largely in men who worked in heavy industry, shipyards, power stations and construction, we are now seeing more women, more young people, more individuals from non-traditional sectors, teachers, hospital workers, clerical roles, all exposed unknowingly and often decades ago. I want to recognise the work of Action on Asbestos, formerly Clydeside Action on Asbestos, a remarkable organisation that for over 30 years has stood by those affected, not just with practical support and legal advice, though they do that tirelessly, but also by working directly with NHS Scotland, funding specialist nurses and vital research to improve treatment and outcomes. The work is not only compassionate, it's critical. Presiding Officer, turning to the issue of the time bar in relation to asbestos-related conditions, well, the Damages Asbestos-Related Conditions Scotland Act 2009 rightly recognises that as asymptomatic conditions like pleural plaques, pleural thickening and asymptomatic asbestosis are actionable harms, we still face a serious problem. Under the current law, a person who has already claimed for an asbestos-related condition may find themselves barred from seeking further damages if they later develop mesothelioma, an incurable and life-limiting cancer. In recognition of this issue, the Scottish Law Commission, in its December 2024 report, recognised this, and I would like to put on the record my thanks to them for their comprehensive work on this issue. The recommendation is crystal clear. Asymptomatic conditions should not trigger the time bar for the later development of symptomatic conditions. I believe this to be a vital step toward fairness, and I welcome it. I have spoken to the Government on this very issue, and there is a need, perhaps even a duty, to consider whether a legislative amendment or regulatory action is required to address this loophole and to ensure that those living with mesothelioma are not penalised by legal technicalities. And on this issue, I would like to ask the Minister if she would consider meeting with myself and Marie McNair to discuss how we can progress this matter. Those affected do not have the luxury of time. They deserve dignity, clarity and justice. Presiding Officer, I close by paying tribute once again to the Clydebank Asbestos Group, to Action on Asbestos and to every campaigner who has fought so hard, often while battling illness themselves. Let Action Mesothelioma Day 2025 not be just a day of remembrance. Let it be a day of renewed resolve to right the wrongs of the past and to protect future generations from a legacy that should never have been theirs and ours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Kidd. I now call Pam Gozo to be followed by Carol Mochan. Ms Gozo.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I would like to thank Marie McNair for bringing such an important topic to the Chamber today. Action Mesothelioma Day is dedicated to raising awareness, a devastating disease that has affected many lives in Scotland and beyond. In 2022, there was 2,257 mesothelioma deaths in the UK, with a significant number occurring in Scotland. The industrial history of Scotland, particularly in shipbuilding and construction, has left a legacy of asbestos exposure, leading to high rates of mesothelioma. Over 70,000 of these deaths occur in individuals aged over 75, highlighting the long latency period of this disease. According to the Scottish Mesothelioma Network's audit report in 2023, the overall number of newly diagnosed mesothelioma patients in Scotland was 132, up from 127 identified by the 2022 audit. Behind these numbers are real people and their families, enduring immense suffering. Mesothelioma is not just a statistic, it is a painful reality for many. The symptoms are deliberating and prognosis of often grim. Patients and their loved ones face physical, emotional and financial hardship. Their stories beyond remind us of the urgent need for action and support. I have had the privilege of meeting with organisations specialising in mesothelioma, such as Clydebank Asbestos Group in my region of West of Scotland. Their dedication to supporting those affected by this condition is truly inspiring. They provide crucial services such as legal service advice, emotional support and advocacy for better healthcare services. Their work ensures that patients and their families do not face this battle alone. The Clydebank Asbestos Group offers a lifeline to many. They assist with navigating the complex legal landscape to secure compensation for victims. They also run support groups providing a space for individuals to share their experiences and find solace in a community that understands their struggles. Their advocacy efforts have led to improvements in healthcare policies and increased funding for this condition and research. Clydebank Asbestos Group have called for the safe and urgent removal of asbestos from all public buildings, as there is an increase in younger people and women diagnosed with this condition. In some of these cases, they have never worked in the traditional industries usually associated with asbestos exposure, with some working in public buildings. Clydebank Asbestos Group are also a strong advocate of the Cape Must Pay campaign, which aims to make Atrad Cape pay £10 million towards this condition. Cape Intermediate Holdings was one of the largest asbestos companies in the world, and its asbestos product widely used in construction. The campaign has argued that these products are at the heart of the condition epidemic in the UK. However, the fight against mesothelioma requires more than the efforts of dedicated organisations. We need a concerted effort from the government to implement stricter regulations on asbestos and to fund research for better treatments. Public awareness campaigns are essential to educate people about the dangers of asbestos and the importance of early detection. In closing, Presiding Officer, let us honour those who have lost their lives to mesothelioma by committing to action. Let us support the organisations that are making a difference and call on the Scottish Government to take stronger measures. Together we can raise awareness, support those affected and work towards a future where mesothelioma is no longer a threat.
Thank you, Ms Gozo. I now call Cara Mochan to be followed by Jackson Carlo. Ms Mochan.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And can I begin by thanking Marie McNair for bringing forward this important debate, and on behalf of Scottish Labour welcome Action Mesothelioma Day 2025, which will be marked on the 4th of July. In the years I've been in Parliament, I am pleased to stand with Marie McNair and other members to play my part in joining and to raise awareness of this cruel condition, to call for further research and to call for this condition to be properly understood as an industrial injury. And of course, as we are all speaking about today in the Chamber, ensure that proper compensation is afforded to sufferers and their families. Mesothelioma is a rare and indeed hard to treat form of cancer, as stated in the motion, usually caused by exposure to asbestos. However, as we know, having debated this many times in this Parliament, despite asbestos being banned over a quarter of a century ago, many worked and continue to work in environments where it is present and where it was present, and it's still found in buildings right across Scotland, and we must address this issue. With 2,700 new cases diagnosed every year in the UK and 200 in Scotland, it remains of utmost importance that we raise awareness of the symptoms of this illness and encourage people to be cautious and have their symptoms checked, because identifying this illness quickly, as with other forms of cancer, can prolong life and ensure more pain-free management of what is a very cruel disease. I have known of this disease from a very young age, having grown up within a working-class mining community. Now, the most up-to-date data that I could find about my own home area in East Ayrshire showed that there had been significant numbers of mesothelioma deaths between the years of 81 to 2019, and that there had been a continuation of deaths past that date with this ongoing impact of asbestos exposure. But in thinking about this debate, I think it's important for me as a member in an area that has a high rate of asbestos to just make sure that we are properly diagnosing and properly documenting the rates of illness and death. And so I commit to doing that. The reality for the people in my area is that the industrial work of the early part of the last century, right up until the 80s and 90s, mainly mining, exposed particularly men to asbestos. But of course, as has been mentioned by other members, we know that the secondary exposure through clothing and washing, etc., often undertaken by women, really increased their risk as well. So many people who suffered exposure to asbestos during their working life have never received any serious compensation, often due to employers jumping through hoops to claim that the cause of their cancer can't be properly proven. And this is why the work of groups such as Clydebank Asbestos Group and Action on Asbestos and other community action groups are so important. The fight they undertake against big business is second to none, and we must always recognise this. We know that this condition We know that conditions such as this exposes the approach of workers' health, it exposes big business and insurance giants. We in this place must be clear that people are worth more than this, and that the lives of working class people, those who have built and maintained our country, these men and women must be compensated should their life be impacted or lost due to the nature of their work. I, of course, welcome the Scottish Law Commission's report, as mentioned by Marie McNair, and it's an important step. But I do believe, although it is an important step, I fear there is more work to do, and I really call on the Minister today to give us some feedback, as Marie McNair had asked, to ensure that we keep fighting to get this right. But I want to also raise that it is important that we keep fighting for compensation, proper compensation, and of course, importantly, for proper health and safety within workplaces to ensure the rights of workers are at the centre of all that we do. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Ms Morgan. I now call Jackson Carlisle to be followed by Richard Leonard. Mr Carlisle.
You know, I find it almost extraordinary. I think it's about 18 years since I first was able to contribute to a debate on mesothelioma, and in a debate then led by Gil Patterson, who was a predecessor of Marie McNair in Clydeside. And I do want to pay tribute to the Clydebank Clydeside Action Group. Their sustained focus and the fact that they turn out in numbers on this condition is really quite remarkable and to be commended, and the compassion that they bring to the work and to the lives of those who subsequently suffer. Isn't it extraordinary that this is yet another of those conditions like aortic aneurysms or Duchenne's disease that just seems to have a home all too tragically here in Scotland, with us as a nation enduring one of the highest incident rates of mesothelioma anywhere in the world, with 2,700 new cases each year, about 200 in Scotland. And when I last participated in a debate in all of this, little did I know that my own uncle would die of mesothelioma just a short time ago, a few years ago. Alan Carlaw was in the motor industry, as was I. They had the British Leyland franchise, we had the Ford franchise, proved to be more reliable of the two in the fullness of time. But these businesses, like so many others, were housed in architecture that was built back in a day when asbestos was a prevailing building material. And I can remember back in the 1970s when, as a business, we sought to clear these asbestos out of buildings, just how ridiculously they had been used as a manufacturing substance and how they deteriorated, and that sense that you could see the asbestos dust in the air. And so for those people who were involved in industries where that was absolutely part of their working day, where in good faith they built Scotland, not recognising that they were doing so around an environment which would subsequently kill them, is, I think, a great injustice and a huge tragedy, and not least because my uncle, like so many others, as pleural plaques did not manifest themselves into the disease until he was a much older man, decades after his exposure to them. And I don't know, maybe I have them too. I was in the motor industry, I don't know. But it was also such an unjust way for anyone to have to end their life, because it is an absolutely ghastly experience for those people who end up having to suffer and die of mesothelioma. And we know they drown effectively in great distress, and there is no soft answer and there is no cure. Presiding Officer, as an adjunct, in my own East Renfrewshire constituency, Leaf East, Renfrewshire and Eastwood and Leaf East, you might not imagine it, but it has the 4th highest ratio of mesothelioma deaths to road traffic deaths. And yet the public focus on road traffic deaths and road traffic management and road traffic prevention is huge. The public awareness of mesothelioma and the incidence that there still is every year in Scotland, and the fact that just because it's a Scottish disease, well, not just a Scottish, but because it's a disease that we find more incidence of in Scotland along with those others, should not be an obstacle to a renewed national effort to ensure that appropriate research is undertaken to seek to get to a point where there is a cure. The absence of a cure, the ongoing lack of awareness and energy and urgency behind it, I think are nothing short of a national disgrace. The people who built Scotland deserve better, and the people who now and may yet contract mesothelioma ought to think and know that there is a national effort being undertaken to make it possible for them to survive that disease should it manifest itself through the identification and implementation of a cure.
Thank you, Mr Carlow. And I now call Richard Leonard.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. And can I remind members of my voluntary register of trade union interests? And can I thank Marie McNair for bringing this motion to Parliament today? Once again, she is acting not as an unconsidered representative of her party, but as a diligent and democratic representative of her constituents. Because the working class of Clydebank know better than anyone of the suffering caused by negligent industrial-scale exposure to asbestos at work. And let us be absolutely clear about this. This is not a debate about history. As we debate this motion in the Scottish Parliament this afternoon, and as we mark Action Mesothelioma Day on July the 4th, the number of asbestos-related cases in Scotland's communities is not falling, it is rising. The evidence from practitioners advising the Scottish Law Commission is that there are over 700 people diagnosed with pleural plaques in Scotland every year, and that this number may not have yet peaked, which is why the Scottish Law Commission's recommendation in its report published last December on damages for personal injury, which at last resolves the time bar problem, must now be enacted. By their own admission, the Law Commission draw heavily on the case made by Unite the Union, articulated by their solicitors, Thomsons, who in their submission argued this: individuals should not be disproportionately penalised for failure to raise court proceedings for a relatively minor injury when they go on to develop a serious and potentially life-threatening illness as a result of the same negligent act. So the Law Commission has made a strong and unambiguous recommendation, and the Scottish Government and this Parliament must act with the same clear thinking, with the same fortitude, and it must act without delay. Because for all of those families, all of those workers, enough time has already been wasted. And that is why I call on the Minister today in Parliament not to meet with me, but to give them an unequivocal guarantee that the Government will amend the Prescription and Limitation Scotland Act 1973 in line with the Scottish Law Commission's recommendation before the end of this Parliament. One of the greatest influences on my politics and in my life was my old friend and comrade Alex Falconer, a member of the European Parliament, a community campaigner, a socialist, a peace activist, a dockyard worker, and a trade unionist to his core. He won a test case in the late 1980s when he was diagnosed with pleural plaques after working with asbestos as a lagger in Rosyth Dockyard. I remember the two of us going to meet the Transport and General Workers Union's lawyers in Glasgow, going to meet Hugh Campbell QC in the splendour of Edinburgh's New Town, and then meeting him again on the steps of the High Court in Edinburgh just days later, to be told that the MOD had decided at the last minute not to defend the action. It was a test case in which the insurance industry was finally forced to recognise that a civil award for pleural plaques could be pursued, and to do so did not close the door on a later damages claim for mesothelioma. And sadly, that is exactly what happened in the life and then in the tragic death of Alec Falconer. So for many of us, Action Mesothelioma Day is not abstract, it is very real, and whether inside Parliament or outside of it, In that battle for justice, alongside the grassroots campaigners in Action on Asbestos and the Clydebank Asbestos Group, we will carry on. It remains painful, poignant and personal, but it is political as well, and so we will carry on. Striving, struggling, yielding to none, facing setbacks, but unflinching in our determination, in the name of all of those we have lost, we will carry on. We will never give up. We will always carry on. We will carry on.
Thank you, Mr Leonard. And I now call on Minister Jenny Minto to respond to the debate. Up to 7 minutes, please.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I too would like to thank my colleague Marie McNair for bringing this motion to the Chamber today and welcome the opportunity to close today's debate on mesothelioma. I would also like to recognise Ms McNair's long-standing support for her constituents and others that are living with the impact of asbestos. I also wish to acknowledge the valuable contributions from my colleagues here today, and I recognise the very strong feeling and cross-party support there is to Ms McNair's motion. Richard Leonard said this wasn't a history, this is happening now. And I think it's always important, as Bill Kidd and Carol Mochan took the time to explain the underlining history of meso, but also the impact that it's having now in the current time with different areas of the population. And I agree very much with Pam Gosel's comments around the lifeline support that the Clydebank Asbestos Group provide for those and their families living with meso. Their website has got a very simple, direct video that explains how they can provide great help and support to families. And also, Jackson Carlaw raises the very important point about these people built Scotland, and so therefore we have a responsibility towards them. And I was first introduced, as I may have said before in other responses to this debate, that I first became aware of it when my husband directed a film for BBC Scotland, and that was about 30 years ago, really raising the knowledge to a wider community. So from my heart, I thank those in the gallery for all the really powerful work that you are doing and holding us to account. On behalf of the Scottish Government, I recognise all those who are affected by this type of cancer, and not just the individuals themselves, but also their loved ones. Adjusting to a cancer diagnosis is never easy, and this can only be especially true for rarer cancers that can leave individuals feeling isolated and worried at an already distressing time. The Scottish Government is therefore committed to ensuring that people impacted by a cancer diagnosis receive person-centred and holistic care, and we work very closely with Macmillan to improve the service we can offer patients with the Transforming Cancer Care programme. Improving cancer survival is also a key aim of the Scottish Government's cancer strategy. We know that earlier detection can improve outcomes, and we've invested in several programmes to support the earlier detection of cancers. And a number of contributions noted the point that mesothelioma is a late diagnosis, and that requires much more research, which I'm very pleased that there are currently 4 active clinical trials open to recruitment that are related to meso in Scotland. The Assess Meso trial is specifically looking at collecting more information about people with meso. This will help researchers know more about symptoms and their impact on daily living so that we can improve care. The Meso Origins trial at the University of Glasgow is aiming to find out how benign inflammation develops into meso in people after exposure to asbestos. And the Extra Meso feasibility study is exploring how exercise therapy can improve symptom control, fitness and the quality of life to patients with meso. And lastly, which looks at the point that Jackson Carlaw was making, Another trial is looking at the effectiveness of a drug which specifically targets the build-up of fluid around the lung caused by meso, aiming to make breathing easier for those affected. And in addition, a core commitment within the Scottish Government's Genomic in Scotland strategy is the development of a sustainable and more reactive funding model so that we can expand access to genomic testing equitably across Scotland, keeping pace with the rapid rate of change. As many have spoken about in the debate today, we are all aware that exposure to asbestos in the past is known to be a major contributing factor in developing meso. As well as aiming to ensure that we prevent exposure to asbestos, which has been banned in the UK since 1999, and that appropriate medical care is in place for those who have been affected by asbestos exposure, the Scottish Government remains committed to ensuring that individuals have appropriate rights to compensation. And as Marie McNair, Richard Leonard, Bill Kidd and others have all noted, the current law on limitation, which sets time limits for raising court proceedings, can cause difficulties for people with meso through no fault of their own. They may find themselves in the position of being time-barred from raising civil proceedings, effectively being denied a legal remedy. The Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament have a strong record of supporting those who have been negligently exposed to asbestos. The law in relation to secondary exposure has developed over recent decades, and we're encouraged to see that those affected are increasingly recognised. The Scottish Law Commission, and I thank them for their work, published several recommendations for reform of damages for personal injury in December last year. These included recommendations to change the law of limitation regarding asymptomatic asbestos-related conditions. The Scottish Government is in support of these recommendations, and we have a proven track record of implementing Scottish Law Commission reports, with 4 bills introduced this season and a 5th to come. Where existing asbestos remains, there are licences required to work with it, and strict control measures are used, including personal protective equipment such as respirators. My colleague, as has been noted, Siobhan Brown, is looking forward to meet with Marie McNair and her constituencies. And I note, as she will, the comments made by both Richard Leonard and Mr Kidd. I am content to meet as well, but that specific element does not fit into my portfolio. And finally, I would like to give my sincere thanks to those providing valuable information, help and support to anyone affected by meso and asbestos-related conditions. I give my thanks to Meso UK for continuing to raise awareness each year on annual Action Meso Day. The Scottish Government will support Go Blue for meso by lighting blue St Andrew's House and Victoria Quay here in Edinburgh on the 4th of July. And I also want to mention again and give my special thanks to the Clydebank Asbestos Group and the work of the Less Survivable Cancers Task Force. The work of third sector, community and social care partners is critical in supporting those affected by meso alongside our NHS. So just to conclude, thank you very much for everyone that's taken part in today's debate, and I look forward to working with all of you to improve awareness, earlier diagnosis, treatment and clinical research and support Action Meso Day 2025.
Thank you, Minister. That concludes the debate, and I suspend this meeting until 2 p.m. Thank you.